everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a fun new kind of video that I've never filmed before. And this is inspired by a video that Greg over at Supposedly Fun filmed a couple weeks ago, where he went through his bookshelves and he picked one book off each shelf that was his favorite from that shelf, and then he sort of did a little battle royale between each book to arrive at his most favorite book on his bookshelves. So I'm standing here today in front of my nonfiction bookshelves. These are the books that I've read and I have collected over the course of many years. And I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go through each shelf and I am going to pick the one book that is my favorite from that particular shelf, and then we'll have a little playoff between each book until we arrive at my most favorite book off my shelves. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we're going to take a look at my bookshelves. Okay, so the way that I have this bookcase organized is this first shelf here is science, nature and science nonfiction, and it goes to the wood barrier here, right here, and it then steps down to the next shelf and then steps down to the third shelf. So that's all science and nature nonfiction. Then this is just a small collection of sort of random nonfiction. The stuff on the bottom is medical related nonfiction. And then over here on the top shelf, we have history nonfiction, which goes down to start right here, continuing on all the way through to, where does it end, the history stuff? I think with Joseph Anton. No, that's not right. No. Yes, right here. So starting with We Should All Be Feminist right there. So starting right here over is sort of like social stuff, social justice and social issue nonfiction from this shelf down to here. And then the very bottom is graphic novel, well, graphic nonfiction for the most part. So, and then this is just sort of a random collection of memorabilia and things that I'm keeping from my past lives. So we won't pay too much attention to this, but we probably will pick something from the graphic section. So this very first shelf, which is science and nature nonfiction, I mean, obviously, if these are on my shelves, I really enjoyed them, and I loved The Great Influenza. Life on the Rocks was fantastic. Yeah, so many of these that I read for the BookTube Prize, which were also awesome. Love David George Haskell, one of my favorite authors of all time. Was introduced to him by Doris at Aldi Books. Lab Girl, one of my favorite books of all time. Feather Thief was amazing. Braiding Sweetgrass, amazing. Many of these you've heard me talk about so often, and how in my Diary of a Young Naturalist. Oh my goodness. I think, honestly, if Lab Girl's got to be it. Lab Girl, I loved so much. Very relatable to me, so I'm going to pick Lab Girl from that shelf. Okay, then moving down here, we've got, what do we have here? The End of Nature by Bill McKibben, Cy Montgomery, World of Wonders. I loved all, like, oh my God, so many of these I loved. Tangled Tree, fantastic book that I read this year. A lot of these are Book Naturalist book club picks I'm seeing, and they were all great. Pandemic, I've read twice and really enjoyed. Seaweed Chronicles, lots of this. These two books are by a main author. Really enjoy those. Sea People, huge favorite. Language of Butterflies was fantastic. Oh, how to pick from this shelf. Wow. This is tough. I think it's got to be Sea People by Christina Thompson, The Puzzle of Polynesia. Oh, read that one with Britta, just absolutely adored it. So then the last bit here of science and nature nonfiction. Invention of Nature is a fantastic, fantastic read. These are my Darwin books and Aldo Leopold there, finally. And then this little collection over here is just sort of humorous essay collections. Really enjoyed Calypso on audio early this year. I love Dick Hornby's essays that he wrote for The Guardian. I think it was it was for Spectator, Spectator magazine. So from this shelf, I've got to pick The Invention of Nature. Just a fantastic book about Alexander von Humboldt and basically the birth of the environmental, like designation of environmental ideas and theories. You can see from my tabs how much I love that book. Okay, and then down here we are with, this is sort of my grouping of what I'm calling medically related health and wellness type stuff. Why We Can't Sleep, Inferno, which I read for BookTube Prize and was great, Moonwalking with Einstein, Being Mortal. Yeah, it's going to be hard to beat Being Mortal. Radium Girls, which I just read, fantastic. Emperor of All Maladies, Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, fantastic. And then some sort of more self-help type books there. Definitely Being Mortal is going to be my favorite from that shelf. Okay, moving on up to history nonfiction. We start with Svetlana Alexievich. Her oral histories are fantastic. Voices from Chernobyl, fantastic. SPQR about Roman history, fantastic. Guns, Germs, and Steel, I've read twice. Yeah, these are fantastic. So many of these. The Bully Pulpit, I really enjoyed this book about Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. Midnight at Chernobyl, a book I read for a BookTube Prize, I believe, also really good. This one, we wish to inform you that tomorrow we will be killed with our families, was the first book I ever read about the Rwandan genocide, and sort of started off my reading about that topic. Sorry, that was bothering me. Yeah, and then I read King Leopold's Ghost after that. Same. This was about the Congo, but really great. How to Hide an Empire. Fantastic book about the United States imperial history. Empire Pain, which I just read the last day of 2021. Fantastic. Say Nothing. Fantastic. And then my Eric Larson's, which I love Eric Larson. My favorite is The Splendid and the Vile. And then If Then by Jill Diapor. Good. So good. What one shall I pick from this shelf? Oh, this is tough. This is really, really tough, but I think it's got to be How to Hide an Empire, because this book just blew my mind. So much in here that I never learned in school. Continuing down here to this small section, we have Zero Fail about the Secret Service, a couple of Michael Lewis books, the Address book, which I read and really enjoyed, some David McCullough, which really enjoyed this one particularly. Oh, excuse me, The Great Bridge. Fantastic read. River of Doubt by Candace Millard, and Fantasy Island by Ed Morales. It's got to be The River of Doubt from this section. Love this one. This is about Theodore Roosevelt and after he was president, he went down to South America and explored a tributary to the Amazon. So good. And then continuing on, like I said, this shelf divides up between history and then leads right into social issues. So we've got some Barack Obama, Eleanor Roosevelt, the Salman Rushdie memoir, Cleopatra by Stacy Schiff, which is a fantastic book. And then we start with the social issues here. Columbine, broke my heart. These books very often are breaking my heart. Hunger by Roxane Gay, fantastic memoir. Her collection that she edited about rape culture, so good. Down East, which is a story about how young girls in rural areas, especially where I live, are making their way in the world these days. Janesville, excellent story about a community out west and what happens after manufacturing leaves. Something Must Be Done about Prince Edward County, about civil rights and making sure that children are educated, specifically Black children. Such a good book. After the Last Border, Carrie by Toni Jensen. Oh, so many good ones. But I absolutely loved Carrie by Toni Jensen. This is a memoir written by an Indigenous woman, a memoir of survival on stolen land. I've just been recently thinking how much I want to reread this book. So it would be a great pick for Nonfiction November and Skoden Readathon. All right, then moving down to more social justice issues. She Said was fantastic. A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid, Inconvenient Indian. I love that one. What's in here? Oh, I think this is Naomi Klein. Yeah, The Battle for Paradise about Puerto Rico after the hurricane. So good. Ghetto Side, just picked that one up. Cockroaches by Scholastique Mukasamba about the Rwandan genocide. So good. Oh, Just Us by Claudia Rankine. Oh, my Esmeralda Santiago memoirs, love those. Hidden Figures was fantastic. How the Word is Passed, 5-star read. All of these, so good. The Warmth of Other Suns and Cast. Oh no. Oh no, how to pick. I think I have to go with The Warmth of Other Suns. This book is so fantastic. If you've not read this story about America's Great Migration, about the migration of Black Americans from the southern part of the United States to the northern part of the United States during Jim Crow, so good. All right, and then last but not least, we have the graphic and sort of miscellaneous nonfiction. We're going to ignore this stuff over here to the left. We have By the Book, which is a collection of that column from the New York Times, a bunch of sort of book-related type things here. Women in Science, They Call This Enemy by George Takei, which is excellent. My Brother's Husband, so good. Good Talk by Mira Jacobs, oh, that blew me away. Dragon Hoops, fantastic. Mouse, March, oh, these are all so good. Oh, so difficult, but I think I have to go with Good Talk. This one really was just, it's a memoir and conversation and about a mixed race family and how the election in 2016 impacted their family. So good. Okay, so let's turn this back around and talk about how we're going to rank these against each other. Okay, now for the hard part, how to pick between these fantastic books. And I will just say that this is just a fun exercise, right? Because on any given day, I could decide completely differently about which ones of these I think are the best. So from the first two shelves, let me try to get the camera back enough so you can see. I picked Lab Girl off the first shelf and Sea People off the second shelf. Lab Girl is a memoir about Hope Jaren's time building her own lab and being a woman in science and how that impacted her life, not only her career, but her family and all that. And then Sea People is a history of Polynesia and how the islands in the Pacific were theoretically settled by waves of people who traveled in canoes. So history, nature, science with a science memoir. And unfortunately for Sea People, I've got to stick with Lab Girl here. The voice, Hope Jaren's voice is just so relatable to me, and I really saw a lot of myself in this book. But this is also a fantastic book, so highly recommend if you have not read Sea People. Okay, next combination, we're going Lab Girl against The Invention of Nature by Alexander von Humboldt's New World by Andrea Wolf. Again, this is another sort of history of the environmental movement and of this Alexander von Humboldt, who lived from 1769 to 1859, and he was the most famous scientist of his age. And he created a lot of the terminology that we now use today to describe things in the environmental field. And this was a fascinating book, as you can tell by my tabs that are still in here. And I loved it. But again, I think Lab Girl is, for me, just because it's so relatable to me, I think it goes a little bit above my love of The Invention of Nature. Again, awesome book that you should totally read. Okay. This one. I love Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. So this book talks about end of life and how we, in the Western part of the world, particularly in the United States, think that we can fix every problem and think that we should employ every tool in our arsenal to save everybody, no matter what the circumstance, no matter what your age is or anything like that. And maybe we should start looking at quality of life versus quantity of life. And what do you really want for your last few years of life? Do you want, how do you want to experience that? And how should we be thinking about end of life care? This book opened up my mind so much to things that I needed to think about in terms of not just myself, but my family, my parents, my grandparents, what I would want for myself, what I want for them. And I honestly feel like Being Mortal should be required reading for everybody. So I think between these two, Being Mortal is the winner. Being Mortal may be my favorite nonfiction book of all time. It's going to be very difficult for any of the rest of these to beat it out, but we shall see. We shall see. We're doing this on the fly. So, but I would definitely recommend Lab Girl if you have not read it yet. Okay, then, so Being Mortal is going up against How to Hide an Empire, A History of the Great United States by Daniel Immerwahr, which is a fantastic look at the United States' imperial past, how we have accumulated territories and countries to benefit our own interests, our own self-interest, without thinking too much about the people that live in those places. So this book talks about the Philippines. It talks about Puerto Rico. It talks about Alaska, Hawaii, a lot, all the territories that we've sort of acquired and why. Cuba. And it was very eye-opening to me. I really like the writing style. But again, it doesn't match my emotional and emotional resonance of Being Mortal, and also how much I felt that Being Mortal applied to my own life and the way I wanted to think about my life and the lives of the people that I love. So highly recommend, but we're going to stay with Being Mortal. Okay, next up, we are comparing The River of Doubt, Theodore Roosevelt's Darkest Journey by Candice Millard with Being Mortal. This book is sort of adventure, narrative nonfiction. Teddy Roosevelt is a larger-than-life character, even though he's a real person. And his this description of his adventures in the Amazon basin, trying to find I forget the name of the River of Doubt was the actual river's name, and it was an uncharted river at the time, at least by white European or Americans. And Teddy Roosevelt was just determined he was going to be the one to discover what was there to be discovered. And it's a fantastic and highly entertaining read. Again, I don't think it's going to topple Being Mortal, which just is so wonderful. Then we have a memoir, Carrie, a memoir of survival on stolen land by Tony Jensen. This memoir is fantastic. One of the best memoirs I've ever read, written by an Indigenous person about how gun violence has impacted like every aspect of her life and continues to do so. She talks about various incidents in her life where guns were involved and what that meant long-term, short-term. It's written in a very unique style. I think it's fabulous and fantastic and really, really important. But again, Being Mortal is so close to my heart. I have to continue with Being Mortal. Oh, this next one is going to be so hard. The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. This is a work of history nonfiction, all about the migration of Black Americans from the South in the U.S. In Jim Crow times, in the early part of the 20th centuries, like late 1800s up through the Civil Rights Movement. It follows several different individuals and tells their stories of leaving the South and what it was like to move up north. A lot, some folks moved to the East Coast, some folks moved to Chicago, and one family moved to California. So much history in there that I did not know from school. It was so important to read. really liked how Wilkerson wove together individual stories with the history of this time period. Fascinating and incredibly important, but again, Being Mortal, because it's just much more personal to me, and I think is a book that needs to be read in order to manage things in your own life. Not that this isn't important, but I think this one just has that emotional resonance for me. It's keeping it number one on my list. And then last but not least is the graphic work of nonfiction, graphic memoir and conversations, Good Talk by Mira Jacobs. Again, this is a book about a family, a biracial family, and how the 2016 election, the run up to that and the politics around that impacted their family, and the conversations that she had with her son, who is mixed race, just so incredibly powerful and so descriptive of what's going on in this country today. I think it's really important. Again, really important, also entertaining, and enjoyed it very much, but does not beat out for me Being Mortal. And so probably not a huge surprise that Being Mortal by Atul Gawande has remained my number one pick off my shelves today. I just would highly recommend, if you have not yet read this. This isn't a huge book by any means, and it is so, so important. Gawande also talks about his own family and what thinking about end-of-life care meant for his own family as he watched his father deal with illnesses later on in his life, and the conversations that they had together about, you know, how to approach this last phase of life. Just so, so, so important. And none of us gets out of here alive. So this one's going to apply to each and every one of us. And I would highly recommend that you read it. So those are some really awesome books off my nonfiction shelves. I hope that you've seen something here that you are interested in and might find yourself picking up in the future. Please let me know down below if there were any books that you saw that are your particular favorites. I'd be really interested to know that. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read. I will talk to you later.